The iPad 7th generation, even though it is kind of an older looking iPad, might be actually one of the best cheap tablets you can get now in 2024. But I wanted to do a little review on it just to see how well does it hold up and kind of give you an idea as to what it's like using this. Now, starting off with the price, you can find these for about $150 on the used market, which I will try to find a link as to where you can find these for around that price. Generally though, you're getting a pretty good value, especially when you compare it to something like a Kindle for around the same price. You are getting an iPad that was once, a $300 iPad. So of course you're going to get, good build quality, a good processor, and like a good overall general experience. However, at that price, you are going to have stuff that's not going to be the latest and greatest. And one of those things is the design. So you kind of compare the design of this to something like, one of the newer iPads, like the iPad Air or the iPad Pro. And you still have a home button with this iPad. You still have the thicker bezels. And then the display on this too doesn't have this thing that's called a laminated display, which is basically a gap between the glass and the actual display part. Some people find it kind of annoying. It's kind of an aesthetic thing. But I think generally it's not going to really affect or bother people. But where that does really come in handy though is repairability. Because that glass is separate from the actual display part, it makes repairing this a lot cheaper. Typically repair the glass in this, it's about $120. And then the actual body of this too, like compared to the newer iPads, it does look a little bit older. You still have the rounded edges on the corners. It still uses Lightning. However, I don't think that's going to be really a big issue. Again, it's a $150 iPad, so you're not going to have like the latest design features. But overall, it generally looks pretty decent. And then the actual usage of this thing too is pretty amazing. I used to have an iPad 7th generation back in high school, and one of my favorite features about it was this thing called split screen. So basically you could have two apps open at the same time. You could have something like Zoom on one screen and Notes on the other, and that just made note taking and like doing work on this a lot easier. You also get a front-facing camera, which is really nice for Zoom calls or FaceTime calls. And then of course you also have Touch ID, which is really nice for unlocking it in a hurry. And overall, like using the operating system and stuff is really intuitive compared to some of the other Android tablets that are out there. There's also different accessories you can add onto this to kind of make it, easier to use for work and stuff. So there's this connector at the bottom called the Smart Connector, and that allows you to connect a keyboard to it that you can use for typing over like a wired connection. So it doesn't use Bluetooth, you actually get a wired connection with that. And then there is also support for the Apple Pencil first generation. Only the first generation Apple Pencil though. Don't get the second, don't get any other Apple Pencil. Make sure you get the Apple Pencil first generation because that's the only one that's compatible with this. And then you can also get different spec upgrades with this as well. So the base storage on this is 32 gigabytes, but you can buy these up to 128 gigabytes of storage. And there's also the option too to get cellular, but do keep in mind if you get a cellular one, you do have to pay an extra cost monthly from your carrier. I forgot exactly what it was, but I think it's like $15 to $20. So you just have to keep that in mind if you're thinking about getting cellular. And then for actual performance, the iPad that I filmed this B-roll with and did this testing with is an iPad 8th generation. Unfortunately, I didn't have an iPad 7th generation on hand, but the 8th generation is typically going to be about the same, just slightly better. And I will tell you this, my family used to have an iPad 6th generation that we'd play Fortnite on, and that uses the same processor that's in the iPad 7th generation. So if it's good enough to play Fortnite, it's going to be good enough to play all your kids' favorite games and stuff. And the performance testing I did do on the iPad 8th generation, I tried downloading Asphalt 9 Legends, which is a pretty graphic intensive game, and I didn't notice any issues or any lag whatsoever using it. So I assume performance-wise with gaming and stuff, you're definitely going to be just fine. App scrolling and things like that, generally performance-wise, I'd say it's good enough. I would notice some lag every once in a while. That's to be expected. It's a cheaper iPad. But I don't think it's really much to do with the operating system. I think it's more to do with the refresh rate. So if you compare it to something like an iPad Pro that has a higher refresh rate, I don't think it's going to be a big issue for the casual users. And then camera quality in this, I would say is kind of like, 2016 smartphone camera quality. It's not really amazing, but it's also not really bad. But I think if you're going to take photos and stuff, you probably just use your phone anyways, so it's not really an issue. And battery life on this is actually pretty amazing. I was able to lose 27% battery health with 2.5 hours of screen on time. I was mainly using that screen on time though, just like browse the web, not really do a ton of performance heavy apps and stuff. So if you are doing that, you're gonna get a little bit less. But like in general, about 7-8 hours of battery life for an iPad this old in that price range, that ain't bad. Now, where my concern mainly lies with this iPad is software support. So this iPad may or may not get the next version of iPadOS 18. And depending on that, you're probably going to get about 2 to 3 years of use, I'd say, out of this. And the reason why I say that is after it gets the latest updates, you typically get about another year or two of app support updates and stuff from the App Store. And then after that, you might notice, support issues where some of your apps like Amazon or YouTube, they may not support the version of iPadOS your iPad's running. But if you are somebody who does want to hold on to this for like the long term, let's say 5 years, I'd highly recommend looking into an iPad 9th generation. You are going to spend a bit more. You're going to spend about $250 if you get it off of Amazon. But you do also get a newer bump in base storage. So instead of 32 gigabytes, you get 64 gigabytes, which that's really handy if you plan on downloading a lot of apps and stuff. So in the end, the iPad 7th generation is a really good iPad for people who are just looking for a cheaper tablet that's an alternative to a Kindle that'll last them a few years. But if you are somebody who does plan on holding on to one of these for a while, I'd highly recommend just spending the extra money, getting something like an iPad 9th generation, which if you want a review on that, I will put one up on screen. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.